All right, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce our panelists here, starting here with Hillary. And Hillary's going to be talking to us about resumes, but Hillary, you do a lot more. So could you give us a quick summation of who you are?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today, Pearl. I'm really excited to be here and chat with everybody. I am a career and entrepreneurial consultant. I opened my own business, High Consulting, in 2017. So we just celebrated 3 years in February. I work with individuals across all career levels. So whether you're just graduating and looking for your first job, or you're a senior executive looking to make a transition to the C-suite, I'm here to help you with putting together your resume, preparing for your interviews, putting together that plan to land that next role. I'm also very active in the local community, so I participate a lot with Local First, Phoenix Startup Week, and I'm also on the board for AZ Talent Co-op. When I'm not here in the office, I'm typically outside, either riding a dirt bike, hiking with the dogs, or out on the lake.
I love that you're dirt bike. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And that's how Hillary and I actually met, was through Startup Week at Phoenix a couple of weeks. I wish, a couple of years ago, being on the team. So it's been a while since I created a resume. Yep. What has changed? What has stayed the same? Is it the same? What should I be thinking of? This is the first time in a long time that I've put together my resume.
That's a fantastic question, Pearl, and it's one that a lot of people are experiencing right now. So the thing with resumes is that they've changed quite a bit in the last about 5 years. It used to be that a resume was including your overall experience. So from the time you started working all the way up until your most current role, you listed every position, and you wanted to avoid showing things like, work experience gaps or time gaps. What's really changed is the introduction of applicant tracking systems. You guys will hear me talk about that quite a bit in any resume writing workshop that we do. These are the background systems that are actually scanning your resume before it even gets in the hands of a human being. So we're really writing for technology and people today. So when you start to outline your resume, you want to keep in mind that there's also a technology component to it now. And the most critical thing to do is to target your resume based on the job that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying for a marketing position, you want to include as much of your marketing experience in there as you possibly can, and perhaps redact or omit some of the things that aren't directly related to marketing positions. For example, if you were a veterinary technician that maybe doesn't have a lot of marketing type tasks related to it.
Awesome. And when you say tracking system, can we break it down a little bit more for play if you were a 5-year-old? What does that mean?
Yes, so the acronym is ATS. That stands for Applicant Tracking System. These systems are being widely used across organizations of all size. So small mom and pop companies have access to them, recruiters have access to them, and so do the large corporations. Especially with today's time and place of all of the virtual recruiting that's happening, the systems are even more widespread than they were before. And so what these systems do is they look at your resume for particular keywords, and these have been identified by the hiring manager or the recruiter that is responsible for bringing in candidates for that position. So they might be looking for something like leadership, communication. If it's a technical role, they're probably looking for particular software programs. So you want to analyze the description that you're reading. The words that are frequently used, identified as being preferred qualifications, and then use that exact language in your resume as well, so that you get what's called a high match rate. And so it's saying that the words you have in your resume match on the job description. We put it together and say this would be a good person.
All right, would you repeat that last sentence? I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit, so I just want to make sure I hear it.
Sure. So you want the exact phrases to be in your resume and in the job description, and then the tracking system will put those two together and say this is an ideal person to call. So it sets you up for that interview. The same. I couldn't agree more either. One of the first conversations that we have when we're starting to build out a resume is that, we don't lie. You don't pad the information. You don't want to sound like you're something that you're not, because it will come through in that next phase of the process.
Right. Well, there's a question actually, the question from Terry, so that I think works well. She just asked the question of how important is a cover letter? And so I thought I would throw that out to you first, Hillary, and then Tisha, Sherry, if you want to jump in as well. But how important is that classic cover letter? Is that still a useful thing?
Well, since you're throwing the question to me first, I'm going to answer honestly, because we're talking about being, our personal brands right now. I really think it depends on the situation. A cover letter is viewed as being a little bit more traditional, so you have to think about the role that you're applying for. If they're requesting a cover letter, absolutely, that cover letter is now critical, and it should be part of your applicant packet that you're submitting. But a lot of the younger companies, and I don't mean, employees, but the younger aged companies that have only been around for a few years, their hiring processes can look a little bit different, and they don't necessarily care about having a cover letter. They would rather have something a little bit more unique. So I think it really depends on the situation. And if you are, going back to you internally, if you are the type of person that would view as a cover letter as being important, then you should have one and put it together. The most important thing about a cover letter is that it shouldn't summarize the resume. It should bring some other type of value to the conversation. It should talk about why you're a good fit culturally. It's a place to really talk about some of those more personal things.
Let's talk about very, very practically. Again, because we're talking about people that there's going to be a mix of people that are, well, if they're recent grads, they may or may not even have work experience. If they haven't had to put a resume together in a long time, and then there's people that have been out of the workforce for a while. So what do you do with gaps for the fact that you have little experience? Like, how do you build an effective resume that has these keywords, that has all of these things? How do you show the experience that you may not have, or it's been a long time since you've had that experience? Let's start with you, Hillary.
There's a couple different ways that you can go about it. Typically, the format that I recommend is starting with your contact information at the top. Very important to include your contact information. And then going into a little bit of like an executive summary. And this doesn't have to be very long. It can be about 50 words, but that really highlights some of the things that are included in the job description. And then right below that, do 9 to 12 bullets where you're calling out specific key traits. So that can be your communication. It can be whatever skill it is that maybe you don't have experience with overall, or you have to maybe look farther back in your career history. That way you can bring it forefront and still have it highlighted and visible. To talk about doing resumes, I'm just going to use my notepad right here. And they hold it like this, right? And they're typically about to their thumb, and you have that far to make that positive impression and get them to continue reading your resume to really bring you in for an interview. As Sherry was saying, time is precious, right? So a lot of resumes may not even be read all the way through. So you want to make sure that those key points are right at the top of the resume. That's a way that you can bring some of that stuff to the forefront that maybe is, a decade or so old, but still relevant. If you're returning to the workforce, that gets a little bit sticky on depending, what experience it is that you have. You can put down that you were a contractor. There's a lot of different ways that you can include that in the experience section. But typically that professional summary and then the 9 to 12 bullets right at the top will do most of that work for you.
Anything else?
I agree, Sherry. I think that putting in the time up front is really going to pay off very well, tenfold or more over when you do land that dream job. But if you are looking for some ways to make it easier, working with a partner that always makes things easier, whether they're applying for a different role or it's one of us here on the call. Just practicing with somebody and having that either cheerleader or accountability partner, however it is that you view that person, can really go a long ways. And as it specifically relates to resumes, have somebody proofread your resume so that it's not just you stressing about, did I get everything in there? Is this appealing to somebody else? It's hard for us to be objective about ourselves. So whether it's a parent, it's a family member, a friend, a colleague, having that one other partner to help you with some of this work is really a big investment.
I'll throw this in just because I know people, LinkedIn, as far as professional world, that's where a lot of people are going. And there's your resume. Are those two things the same? Are they different? I'm one of those people that right now my LinkedIn basically is a digital version of my resume. Probably shouldn't be. What should it be more like?
Well, there's a couple points rolled into that one question there, but as we were just having this conversation about protecting your brand online, one question that I'm asked pretty frequently is, should I have a LinkedIn? How important is LinkedIn? And these are some of the examples that I will come back with, is that LinkedIn is that social media platform that you can build and construct that puts your professional foot forward. It's not Facebook, it's not Instagram, right? But it is still a social media platform. So when you Google a person's name, the first things to ever pop up are social media accounts, and LinkedIn is still a social media account. So I do think it's strongly suggested that you build yourself a LinkedIn that you can create and put together. Now, whether or not it should be the same as your resume, there's a couple different schools of thought there. Some people will tell you, yes, that it is your online resume. I personally view it as a place where you can put your personal brand with it. So it shouldn't just be a copy of your resume. It should complement your resume. It's an additional piece that an employer can see about you. So you can kind of pick and choose some of the information that you want on there. It should have your professional experience, but it should be about who you are too. I have a picture. I don't have a picture of my dogs. I have a comment about my dogs in my about statement on my LinkedIn profile. I don't put that on my resume. So, it just kind of gives you that personal edge there to be able to use.
Any last thoughts I want to give out? All right, one last thing, just one last final thought you want to give, and then that will be the end. So, Hillary, go.
Proofread your resume. That's my last and final thought to leave you with. It is so important. It can really make or break the difference of whether or not you get the opportunity for an interview. So find a friend, read it 10 times. If it's good, read it one more time.